Good morning. I've got my tea. It's a gray day here in Greenville, and I want to talk about something that happened last week that I keep thinking about. My name is Carol. I'm 69. I retired a couple of years ago, and I lost my husband Frank about 2 years before that. So I've been doing a lot of figuring out at once. This channel is me talking through it. The money stuff, the lonely stuff, the surprisingly okay stuff. I sit here in my armchair in the living room. It was Frank's chair before it became the filming chair. I started sitting in it after he died, and then it became where I make the videos. Behind me is a bookshelf with real books, a few framed photos, and a small plant I keep alive as a point of personal pride. I wear my wedding ring still, a simple gold band. People ask about it in the comments all the time. It still feels like mine to wear, and I'll decide when and if that changes. I have silver white hair, naturally so since my mid-50s. Frank used to tell me the silver suited me better than the brown ever did. Small memories like that stay with you. We had a very specific plan for this phase of our lives. We had the savings fully lined up. We understood exactly how our Social Security survivor benefits would work. The mortgage on this house was completely paid off in 2018. That was Frank's idea. I am grateful for this every single month. He was a civil engineer for the county. He worked for 35 years, and he retired exactly 6 months before he died. He liked things settled and organized. Any financial advisor would have looked at our paperwork and told us we were in excellent shape. The financial part was as secure as it could possibly be. I want to be honest about the numbers because I think vague is not helpful. My Social Security survivor benefit is $1,890, and my own pension from the school district is $1,240. That brings in $3,130 per month. My monthly expenses are low. Property tax and insurance are $310. Utilities are $160. Groceries are $280. Medicare supplement is $187. Car insurance and gas are $130. Phone is $48. Streaming services are $29. Church and community contributions are $80. Miscellaneous and personal are $220. My total expenses are approximately $1,444. What is left is around $1,686 per month. I put $800 into savings, and I keep $886 as spending money. I consider this more than enough, and I am aware that I am luckier than many widows my age. But about a year into my retirement, I realized I was completely suffocating, and it had absolutely nothing to do with money. I was sitting in a house we had lived in for decades. Every single room was packed with the life we had built together. I had 40 years of accumulated things surrounding me, and I realized that holding on to all of it was actually keeping me from figuring out how to live the rest of my life. You wake up in the morning and you walk into your own kitchen. The house is completely quiet. You open a drawer just to find a simple pair of scissors to cut open a piece of mail, and you have to move past 3 broken tape measures. You have to push aside a stack of old warranties for appliances you no longer own. You find a coffee grinder you haven't used in 3 years, and that feels paralyzing. Not good weird, just weird. You look around and realize your house is no longer a place to live. It has slowly become a museum of the past. I felt like I was acting as the curator for a museum that only had one visitor, me. I am not going to give you a 5-step system for organizing your closets. I am not a minimalist. I never will be. I am just going to tell you what happened when I finally started letting go of the physical weight in this house. And I will tell you what we figured out along the way. I had been dreading the garage for 2 solid years. Frank died in October 2019. It was a Saturday. He was mowing the lawn. I found him. It was sudden, and after that happened, the house just froze. Everything stayed exactly where it was. His winter coat was on the hook by the back door. His work boots were sitting right there on the mat, and his workshop out in the garage was exactly as he left it. He was the planner, I was the talker. He did the spreadsheets, I did the conversations. We had a system. When he died, I inherited the spreadsheets. I went back to work for a while after he passed, not because I had to financially, because I needed somewhere to be. The consulting work became a lifeline. When I finally retired in March 2021, the silence of the house got very loud. I took the retirement date from the spreadsheet and kept it. It felt like keeping a promise to him, even though the promise was to us. I do my own budget in a spreadsheet now, the same format Frank built. I updated it to say Carol's numbers at the top, but kept everything else. I couldn't even park my car in the garage. It was filled with tools I didn't know how to use. I stood out there one morning with my tea. I switched from coffee after Frank died because the smell became too associated with him for a while. I looked at a wall of perfectly organized wrenches, and I just started to cry. I realized I wasn't keeping the tools because I needed them. I was keeping them because getting rid of them felt like erasing him. That was the moment I realized my clutter was actually just unprocessed grief. So I want to go through 5 things I noticed when I finally started clearing out this house. 5 things about decluttering that completely changed how my retirement feels. Things I genuinely wish someone had explained to me much earlier. The first thing I realized is that keeping things just in case is a terrible strategy for retirement. We all do it. You keep the extra set of massive serving dishes. You tell yourself it is just in case the entire extended family comes over for a holiday dinner. You keep the heavy winter coats just in case the climate suddenly changes. You keep a broken lawnmower just in case you somehow find the time to fix it. Frank was the absolute king of just in case. He grew up in a family that didn't have much. He saved everything. He truly believed that discarding something useful was a kind of sin. When I started going through the basement, I found 4 different backup coffee makers. 4 of them. They were still in their original cardboard boxes. They were stacked neatly on a metal shelf. They were covered in a thick layer of dust. I spent a whole week just staring at those boxes down in the basement. I was doing the new math. That is what I call the math you have to do when you are making decisions alone versus the math we did together. I realized that the statistical probability of me needing 4 backup coffee makers was exactly 0. But the emotional cost of storing them was very real. Walking past them and feeling the obligation of them was happening to me every single day. That's when I figured out that we hold on to things to protect ourselves from some imaginary future disaster. But all we are really doing is completely cluttering up our present moment. I boxed up 3 of the coffee makers. I put them in the trunk of my car. I drove them down to a family shelter in town. The woman at the desk was so grateful. It actually felt like I had taken a physical weight right off my chest. I drove home, and the basement looked just a little bit brighter. The second thing I learned is that your adult children mostly do not want your stuff. I know that sounds harsh. I truly don't mean it to be. But it is simply the reality of how they live now. My daughter Jennifer lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. That is about 90 minutes from here. We call her Jen. She is 44, and she is a marketing director at a healthcare company. Jen is protective of me in a way that sometimes feels like management. She checks in frequently, sometimes too frequently. I love her completely and occasionally need an afternoon without the check-ins. I had this massive dining room set. It was heavy, dark mahogany wood. We bought it in 1985. It sat 8 people very comfortably. You could fit 12 if you squeezed the chairs together. It had a deep scratch on one of the leaves from Thanksgiving in 1998. I almost never used it anymore. I asked Jen if she wanted the dining set for her house. I thought it would be a beautiful family heirloom for her and her husband Tony. Jen was very kind about it, but she said, "Mom, our house is mid-century modern. That table is the size of a boat." She didn't want the silver either. She didn't want the heavy crystal glasses we got as a wedding gift. My son David lives out in Portland, Oregon. He is 41, and he is a landscape architect. He has a small, beautiful, minimalist house. He didn't want the antique grandfather clock that chimes every single hour. He has 2 young kids. Sam is 9 and Nora is 6. The absolute last thing David needs in his life is a loud clock waking them up. My younger brother Thomas is 65 and still working in Bloomington, Indiana. My maiden name was Kowalski. Thomas kept a different surname after a family matter we don't discuss. We are close, but not in a frequent contact way. He came to Frank's funeral, and I remember exactly what he said to me. He looked around the house and he said, "Carol, the house is going to feel big, but don't let the furniture become an anchor." He was right. My older sister Patty is 72, and she lives in Indianapolis. She is widowed herself, and I call her my advance scout. We talk on the phone every Thursday. Patty told me years ago that our kids don't want our furniture, they just want us to be okay. That's when I figured out that we attach our own deep sentimental value to objects, and then we expect our kids to carry that exact same value. But they have their own lives, they have their own taste. Holding on to a heavy wooden table just so you can burden your children with it later isn't a gift. It's just a delayed chore. I ended up selling the dining set on the internet. A lovely young family came and picked it up in a rented truck. I used the money to buy a really comfortable reading chair for the guest room. It changed the whole feel of the space. The third thing I noticed is that decluttering requires you to be completely honest about who you are right now, not who you used to be, and not who you thought you would be. I was a 3rd grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary School in Terre Haute, Indiana, from 1977 to 1998. Then I was a curriculum coordinator for the Vigo County School Corporation until 2014. I had boxes and boxes of old lesson plans. I had stacks of faded construction paper. I had border trims for bulletin boards. I had thousands of those little gold star stickers. I had hauled all of it from Indiana to South Carolina when we moved. I told myself I was keeping it because I might volunteer to tutor. But I wasn't tutoring. I was retired. Every time I looked at those boxes in the spare room, I felt a strange guilt. I had to sit down one afternoon and have a very honest conversation with myself. I had to admit that the woman who was going to use those teaching supplies didn't exist anymore. My career was over. It was a good career, but it was finished. I've maintained relationships with Frank's family too, his sister Barbara in Ohio, and a few cousins. I consider this important. They're how I stay connected to the version of Frank I didn't know. I visit Barbara once a year. But my daily life is here. When we planned this retirement, we planned it together. Frank and I had a whole vision. We were going to travel. Frank had a spreadsheet listing all the national parks he wanted to see. I still have that spreadsheet in a notebook I keep on the table. I call it the book. The cover is worn. We bought a lot of expensive camping gear for those trips. We bought a massive 6-person tent. We bought portable stoves and heavy sleeping bags. That gear sat in the garage for 3 years after he died. I am not going to go pitch a massive tent in Wyoming by myself. I am almost 70 years old. I like a comfortable mattress. I like running water. That's when I figured out that getting rid of the teaching supplies and the camping gear wasn't giving up on travel or my past. It was giving up on a fantasy that was simply no longer true. I donated the school supplies to a brand new teacher at the local elementary school here in Greenville. She was thrilled to have them. I gave the camping gear to my nephew, and I booked myself a quiet hotel room in Savannah for a long weekend. It was the first trip I took entirely alone. I brought my reading glasses and a good book. I sat by the window, and I had a truly wonderful time. The fourth thing is something that caused a bit of friction in my family. It has to do with how your adult children try to help you. When you decide to declutter, everyone wants to manage the process for you. Jen came down for a long weekend to help me tackle the guest room. I mentioned she is efficient. Jen is a problem solver. When Frank died, she organized everything: the funeral, the paperwork, the meals. She wants to clear a room in 4 hours flat. She brought heavy-duty black trash bags. She brought a label maker she bought specifically for this trip. She wanted me to make rapid-fire decisions. She would hold up a box of old family photographs. She would expect a final verdict in 10 seconds. Keep, donate, or trash. I couldn't do it. I just froze. I found myself snapping at her. I told her she was rushing me. She got frustrated. She told me I was being stubbornly attached to things that didn't matter. She held up an old, chipped Christmas ornament from 1982. She asked why on earth I wanted to keep it. We ended up having a very tense afternoon. We barely spoke during dinner. David called that Sunday. He calls every Sunday without fail. It was Frank's habit, passed down without discussion. David is softer than Jen, more comfortable sitting in difficult feelings. When I have a hard week, I usually call David. He asks about Frank, and he's the only one who does regularly. I appreciate this more than I have fully told him. He asked me how the cleaning was going. I told him I felt like Jen was trying to erase the past. I told him she was treating my memories like a logistics problem. David listened quietly, and then he said, "Mom, Jen organizes things when she doesn't know what else to do with her feelings. She's not rushing you. She's just trying to fix something she can't actually fix." That's when I figured out that decluttering is not an administrative task. It is a deeply emotional process. You are physically handling your memories. You have to go at your own pace. I had to tell Jen that I loved her completely, but I needed to do this slowly. I needed to hold a coffee mug for 10 minutes before I decided to put it in the donation box. You cannot speed run a transition this big. You have to allow yourself the actual time to feel the letting go. Jen understood. We compromised. She labeled the boxes. I decided what went inside them. My grandson Marco is 13, and he is quieter, like Frank was at that age. He helped carry the boxes out. Ella is 16, and she texted me later that day. It was a good weekend after all. The fifth and final thing I learned is that clearing the physical space actually clears the mental space. I know that sounds like a cliche you read on a decorative throw pillow, but I promise you it is absolutely true. My bedroom closet was the hardest part of the entire house. Frank's clothes were taking up exactly half the space. His suits, his button-down shirts, his ties. For 2 full years, I opened that closet every single morning. I looked at the clothes of a man who was never going to wear them again. It was a daily, visceral reminder of absence. It made starting the day feel impossibly heavy. The smell of his aftershave was still faintly caught in the fabric of his jackets. One Tuesday, I finally decided it was time. I am not a grief channel. I do not say every day is a gift. I do not say he's in a better place, because I find it hollow. I do not say everything happens for a reason. I say some days are better than others. Decluttering the closet was one of the harder days. I didn't do it all at once. I did it very slowly. I kept his favorite flannel shirt. I kept one of his ties, the blue one he wore to Jen's wedding. I packed the rest into neat cardboard boxes. I drove them to an organization downtown that helps men re-enter the workforce. They provide professional clothing for job interviews. Frank would have liked that. He respected people who worked hard. When I came back home and looked at the closet, it was half empty. But it didn't feel empty in a bad way. It felt like space. It felt like room to breathe. I moved my own clothes around. I organized my cardigans, the dusty rose ones, the soft blues, the cream ones, the sage greens. I almost never wear black on camera. I made that choice consciously. I looked at my newly organized closet, and I realized something profound. I had been living in a shrine to my old life, and you simply cannot build a new life inside a shrine. That's when I figured out that decluttering isn't about throwing your memories away. Frank is still here. He is present in the room without being a ghost. I hear his voice constantly. I often say, Frank would have had an opinion about this. He always did. He would have hated how much I paid for the new reading chair. Decluttering is simply the act of making room for the person you are right now. It is giving yourself permission to occupy your own house fully. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's possible. Those are different things. Some days are better than others. Yesterday was a better one. I sat in this armchair in the afternoon. I looked around a living room that feels lighter. It feels more intentional. It feels like my space now. When we planned this retirement, we planned it together. Now I'm doing the planning alone. The math is the same. Everything else is different. I am building what's mine now. It just took me a while to understand that was allowed. And I think that is worth saying out loud. If any of this sounds familiar to you, leave a comment below. I read them. Tell me how you are handling the physical stuff of your retirement. Specifically, what is the one single item in your house that you know you do not need, but you absolutely cannot bring yourself to get rid of yet? I find those answers more useful than you think. We are all figuring this out together. Okay, I think that's what I wanted to say. Thanks for being here.